She was a fair match. I'm sorry, James. It was crucial that Myrmidon and MI6 all continued to believe I was dead. I couldn't get to you without them seeing. Today on the Comic Book Report, 007 for King and Country. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm back in the world of Ian Fleming's James Bond, courtesy of Dynamite Comics with 007 King and Country. At the time of this recording, this is a very recent release and technically a volume 2 for the run from Phillip Kennedy Johnson. I will admit I am going into this relatively blind. I am a fan of the Ian Fleming novels and of course the film franchise, but I believe this is only really the second proper James Bond comic I've ever read. I did read the entire Warren Ellis run and I did review that on my channel at one point, but I will go ahead and admit right here, I did not read the volume 1 of this Phillip Kennedy Johnson era. I am starting with this book, but this book is its own mission, so I didn't feel like I missed out on that much. Before we jump into the review today, I did want to just say a huge thank you to those at Dynamite for sending over this copy for review. Now let's go ahead and jump in. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Phillip Kennedy Johnson and penciled by Giorgio Spalletta and Alessio Avallone. The comics in this volume were published by Dynamite Entertainment beginning in 2023. As far as what this edition collects, this includes 007 for King and Country, issues 1 through 6. And finally, this is a standard size hardcover edition with nice glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 152 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that front cover for King and Country. This is a really beautiful cover. It's definitely indicative and kind of immediately evocative of a James Bond cover. We have the gentleman spy, we have a kind of beautiful femme fatale kind of Bond girl on the front, and honestly, it just really jumps out at you. It has that kind of pulpy feel as well. Overall, I think the cover design is pretty stellar. As we transition over to the spine design, I will say I really like it. It's extremely crisp. I love all the fonts they used, and I like the kind of field of, like kind of bluish color, I would say. We have publication information, title, creator, things like that you would normally expect. Overall, very happy with it. I don't see any indication that this is a volume 2, but this is the second collection in that Phillip Kennedy Johnson era. Like I said, these breakdowns seem to be by mission, so you don't really miss out on too much. I get why there's not a big number 2 on the spine, for example. Back cover I think is quite nice. I do like that we have kind of Bond, some of these other figures, blurbs about the book, contents, things like that. It should be noted there is a teen plus age advisory. This is largely due to violence and one scene of sexual content. As I mentioned earlier, this is a standard size hardcover, but there is no dust jacket on this collection. It's just the hardbound book itself. And now for all you prospective collectors out there, I wanted to give a quick look at the binding. As I mentioned earlier, I do believe this is a sewn binding. They might have used a little glue as well. It's a little hard to tell, but I think this edition is really well bound. I had absolutely no complaints whatsoever. Very minimal gutter loss. It laid down nice for me. Overall, like I said, good stuff here. And with that, we've covered the exteriors and the build of the book, and I think it's time to go ahead and dive into the collection. And as we make our way in, after we are treated to some white end pages, we have a nice title page, a kind of creator breakdown title page, publication information, and then we do have a nice chapter break. We get a little page that says chapter 1. We flip it over, and we do have the fully reproduced cover for issue 1, which I love seeing. Yes, this edition has the covers nice and in between the issues. I always love to see that. And then we're off to the races. We jump right into the middle of the action. So I mentioned it a couple times already in this video, but for those maybe skimming around the video, this is technically a volume 2 of the Phillip Kennedy Johnson run on 007 James Bond, but because it's broken down by mission, this is still kind of a fine place for new readers. I did mention I did not read the previous volume, which I believe is titled Myrmidon. It's kind of a criminal syndicate or organization. They are heavily referenced in this volume, volume, however, so I am not totally sure how critical that volume was, but just be aware this is an organization. There has been things that have happened in the past, but I think if you're like myself, you can pick up this volume if it's convenient, and you're not really missing too much. Plot-wise for this collection, we essentially have Bond in kind of a car chase situation with another woman who was a former kind of MI6 special agent. She was a 00 that was presumed dead. In fact, Bond claims at one point in this volume he saw her die, and he actually murdered the man who killed her. It is a bit complex, but essentially we're right into the action, and essentially Bond has been burned as a secret agent. His whole organization has sort of disavowed him and is on the hunt for him. He's allied himself with this once thought dead agent who was kind of a paragon for what a good secret agent should be. Anyway, the two of them team up to kind of uncover and topple a huge conspiracy where Mimrodon is basically trying to inject people with this kind of experimental compound or vaccine that will turn them kind of into super soldiers, but we know that this is at the sort of expense of their life. They ultimately burn out after a year or two, and this is all sort of hush-hush, but basically Bond and this old 00 agent are trying to bring this truth to light and basically stop this organization. This organization, though, is getting a lot of prestige and has infiltrated MI6 and some organizations across the world, like I believe the CIA or Department of Defense or something over in the US. If you can't tell already, the setup is very much sort of the rogue mission kind of Bond feeling. We've had movies like this, we've had books like this, but this is sort of when the secret agent has been deemed a kind of traitor or a treasonous agent by their government, and they're trying to clear their name and basically fight for the side of right, regardless of who's in their corner. And that's really what we have here. We do have that conspiracy sort of slowly come into focus, reveal itself, like I said, but that's overall the kind of impression of the plot. We basically have this evil organization doing this kind of nanotech super soldier vaccine technology that has a huge drawback, and basically Bond's trying to stop it with the help of this agent. Along the way, we basically have MI6 recruiting all of the remaining 00 agents to go on a manhunt for Bond and this agent, and I really like this setup. It's sort of the best of this agency trying to stop Bond and company. I think that this was a cool way to expose us to other 00s, which is already such a prestigious kind of agent ranking, of course, and overall it was really cool. I like that it was a manhunt. I like that there was a central kind of intrigue, conspiracy, thriller, mystery, and I think it worked on all counts. I don't know that I would go so far as to say it was formulaic, because I do think it has a lot of unique twists and turns, but I liked feeling like I was in a genre I understood or I had played with before. I do think that this character feels 100% like James Bond. Whether you're a fan of the novels or the film franchise, this is definitely very evocative of a Bond I've come to know and enjoy, and for that I give Phillip Kennedy Johnson all the credit in the world. I also think his pacing, plotting was all totally there and dialed in. I think the supporting cast of characters, where present, were quite good. Maybe not the most memorable characters I've ever read in a Bond book, but definitely fun to play with. I do also think the art throughout is very striking. We have two pencilers, but I think there's a level of cohesion between artists that I never felt jarred or kind of thrown out of the environment. I do think also Bond is definitely character modeled how I would expect for Bond, and some of his mainstay characters or tropes. I think it's all very good there from the artist. I also really like how the artist brought that sense of kinetic energy to a lot of the action sequence. There's kind of the frenetic movement of the car chases or the battle sequences, and I think the action was very clear and easy to follow, but exciting. And I'm not really sure how that's achieved, but I did want to call it out because I'm just impressed by it. It reminds me when I see a really good artist tackle The Flash that has a lot of intricate or complex kind of fast-paced action sequences and how they choose to depict that. Anyway, I think it was just really well done. But as the plot unfolds, there is another subplot of, is this 00 that Bond is with, is she actually a double agent? Is she actually an enemy agent that's kind of going for her own ends? What is her whole motivation here? Can she be trusted? Along the way, we also meet Felix Leiter, his kind of U.S. special agent counterpart, and there's a lot of who is really loyal here? Who do we follow? What can we do? We also have a character that's been exposed to that super soldier serum that's kind of helping them as well to uncover the mystery. We do have kind of a love triangle betrayal of sorts explored within this book as well. But overall, everything kind of comes to a head at an enemy compound where basically Bond has to stop. Myrmidon has to stop some of these double O's or any other moles or traitors along the way. And I won't spoil absolutely everything for you. Like I said, there's a couple fun reveals here and twists and turns that I'll let you experience for yourself. But everything felt very Bond all the way down to the final conclusion or climax in Act 3. And I was really happy overall. A very fun thrill ride. A kind of novel note that might just be for me, when I was reading this, it did remind me of another comic book storyline I had read a couple years back. I am, of course, talking about Iron Man Extremis, which was also a kind of, hey, there's this sort of nanotech kind of experimental stuff that makes you into kind of a superhuman kind of figure, but there are some serious drawbacks. So I think it was pretty reminiscent of that. I know that also didn't kind of invent the wheel, so to speak, but reading these pages, I did immediately remember that storyline from Iron Man, or if you're a fan of Iron Man 3, the film, I definitely drew from that as well. And I know this was unrelated, but I like drawing some parallels, if for no other reason, just in my own mind, to kind of have that level of intertextuality. I thought was fun. But yeah, this is a really good book. I did enjoy it. I am curious in the comments, if you've read Philip Kennedy Johnson's Volume 1, did it help inform what came here for fans of this book, if you've been keeping current, or if you picked up this collection as well? I'd like to know, should I go back and read it? You know, it's titled Myrmidon, which is an organization that definitely came up in this book, but I did like that this was its own mission for all intents and purposes. But yeah, if you've been following the series, definitely let me know if I should be reading more. I would appreciate that. At the back of the collection, I am happy to say we have a great cover art gallery. We got some variant covers, all of which are reproduced in full scale, which is really a delight. We don't have any of the small thumbnailed. We have full page covers reproduced. Really nice to have this at the back of a collection. I definitely don't take it for granted. With these kind of smaller releases, you never really know what you're going to get by way of extras, and the fact that we not only had the main issue covers, but we get to see so much of the variant art, I just think it's a really good plus if you're a fan of collected editions. Overall, this was a really entertaining Bond mission. I don't think it's the most riveting Bond story I've ever read, and yet I felt like it was a very cool mix of modern storytelling and kind of tropes, mixed with just some classic Bond pacing, feel, and moments. And overall, I do tip my hat. I think that this was really well constructed and definitely a fun Bond venture. Reading this story, I would be curious to read the Volume 1 or any subsequent storylines that Philip Kennedy Johnson and team bring to the table. If you have read For King and Country, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to get some discussions going, but really that brings us to the end of today's collection. And as is the case with all of my comic book review videos, I think all that's left to do now is to give this collection a grade. For being essentially new reader friendly while also maintaining everything that makes a good Bond story great and enjoyable, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Ian Fleming's James Bond 007 For King and Country a B. For me, this is an above average read and one I would recommend to a lot of Bond fans out there. I think the art was all pretty dialed in and definitely worked well, especially in the more action-based sequences. I am intrigued to see the overall mythos that Philip Kennedy Johnson is constructing for Bond across his run, but I think if you just want a quick, fun Bond adventure, some just pure blockbuster entertainment, this is definitely a book that could be worth the journey. But as I've said already, let me know what you think in the comments. I would love to get more discussion going about this or other Bond comic books that might be worth reading. Again, a huge thank you for all of those at Dynamite for sending over this copy for review, and for everyone else, thank you for watching. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, that comment we talked about, and maybe share it with a friend. Thanks everyone, have a good one.